NL Cy Young, though, like, again, I'm looking for teams that are going to win more often than not. I know winning the division isn't a mandate, but I'd like to see that. But some incredibly short numbers at the top of the board on guys who make a ton of sense, like Spencer Strider in particular.
Yeah, for sure. Look, this award has brought us a lot of value in recent years. So this is where you don't mind going a little bit further down and trying to, just stay away from the very top. I think it's different in the sense of the MVP compared to the Cy Young. Like Snell preseason, early in the season, you could have got a terrific number. He was 35-1 last year. Sandy a couple years ago, you could get him at 16 preseason. Burns before he came onto the scene, that was obviously his first blow up season, 35-1. I mean, you can go all over the place. The last time we saw like one of the significant favorites win was 2019 when it was Jacob deGrom, one of those few seasons when he actually stayed healthy. So I don't mind going down the board. And actually, I'm surprised how much value. Like you look at the top, a guy that I thought would be near the top, but you're getting value. Why is Aaron Nola 25-1?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I didn't understand that one at all. Now, there are other things like guys coming back from injury. How much do you trust it? Do you want to take that chance and get some of the value there? Sandy goes down with an injury. He goes on the 60-day DL recently. So a recent winner, and he's not going to be involved in this market. But there are some names that are like, whoa, really? The projections love Senga. Some other players that are coming over. Walker Buehler threw a BP the other day. They said he was sitting 94, 95 miles per hour. If he's ready for the start of the season or even a couple weeks into the start of the season, we know what the ceiling is there. There's 100-1 on Walker Buehler. So that certainly stood out to me. So pay close attention to his health the rest of the spring.
Is this another market where you're thinking about waiting? It sounds like wait to get a better number, unless it is like a Walker Buehler or Aaron Nola now. I didn't find myself wanting to bet. I thought Zach Gallen was pretty intriguing. I don't know how I keep landing on these Diamondbacks players for these awards, but following up on what he did, he just seems to be getting better and better, and he's a big reason why the Diamondbacks have had success. He had a really good start to the season, and then like his last 7 starts or so, not as great. His ERA was 4.93. So, but 11-3 with a 3.04 ERA in 19 games to start. So that could be one I would look at, but it's 12-1. So I'm not sure if there's enough value for me to bet on that right now.
So I have 3 on the NL side. One's short, one's medium, one's long. And the long shot is stop it, Hawk. The long one is I'm shouting out Jake here since he's off today. I think he mentioned this a couple weeks ago when we were talking Cy Young while you guys were off. Hunter Greene at like 40-1, 50-1. If the Reds win that division, and look, the Centrals are completely up for grabs. There's probably 8 or 9 teams between the two divisions that could get into the playoffs with like 83 wins or end up going down in flames beautifully. That's just the nature of the Central divisions, I think. But Hunter Greene at 40 or 50-1, he's going to be a reason they win the division if they win the division, giving them consistent work in the rotation. You mentioned Nola already, Joe. When you look at the projections, I don't understand why his number is so long. So that would be one that I would be tempted to jump in on now, anywhere from 22-1 to 28-1. And then it's a shorter number, but I'm not all in on Spencer Strider being Superman yet. Like Max Fried at 14-1, I think there's a little bit of value there because we know the Braves are going to win games. We know the Braves are most likely going to win their division. And if Spencer Strider were to, and I'm not wishing this on anybody, but if Spencer Strider were to go down for a few weeks, or maybe just isn't effective for a third of the season, we saw he wasn't very effective last September, to be honest. I think Fried, if that were to happen early in the year, and you lose a bunch of value on Strider because you jumped in on him too early, Fried could be the guy in a contract year who maybe helps keep that rotation afloat should it hit any bumps in the road or any struggles at all. So those are the ones I had to look at, but I do think whether it's NL or AL, which we'll talk about in about an hour and a half, it just pays to wait until closer to Memorial Day in both of these markets. It's not unrealistic at all to look at, say, I don't know, I'd say the top 3 or 4 names on the board. Like, let's talk Cole, Gausman, Burns, Framber, and go, okay, what if none of those guys is lighting it up through the first half of the season? What if they're all, pitching well, but not lighting it up? And then you take one of these guys, in particular Scherzer. McClanahan's another one, again, based on when he may come back. His return might be a little bit later than Scherzer and might take him out of this conversation. But somebody comes back around the All-Star break or just after and slams on the gas for 2 months, okay, that might be enough. Again, when we talked about the National League market earlier, Joe, we talked about how this is not, these are not the Rob Deere days, right? This is not when Nolan Ryan would throw 300 innings. Sorry, I had to just sprinkle in the Rob Deere reference just to totally take us off the Friday rails. But this isn't the olden days when you had to win 20 games to win a Cy Young.
No.
Tyler Glasnow could start 20 games this year, and that would be considered possibly his largest workload of his career and could be enough given the metrics, the K per 9, the ERA, to put him in the Cy Young conversation in the National League. So then all of a sudden you bring it back to these older guys that are coming back in the American League, and it's not unrealistic to talk about a guy coming back just after the break, getting, 18 starts in maybe, 15 to 18 starts. And if the numbers are blowing everybody else out of the water, the metrics, right, the rate stats, then they get consideration, especially when they've got a previous reputation like a guy like Scherzer.
I want to bet Burns. It's like 10-1, but do I want to bet it at that short of a number? It wouldn't surprise me at all if he ends up being the best pitcher in the American League, goes there. Hey, how many and it's not like he's been bad either. Like, he's still at the peak of his powers, and then now you're going into the most competitive situation you've ever been in, and everybody's talking about Baltimore. They're no longer the cute story. Now there are big expectations with that team. We're talking about World Series, and it's legitimate after what they did last year and how they improved this roster. So Burns is the third favorite at 10-1. It certainly is enticing. Some other names that pop. This one is scary because of what could happen. Talking about Dylan Cease, the strikeout rate is always going to be there. At times, the workload, like, he only lasts 5 innings, but like we've talked about, sometimes that ends up being the norm in the sport. Walks are always an issue. If he can take care of the walks, just a little bit, he will be in the conversation. The problem is, what if he starts the season with the Sox and then he gets dealt to the other league? Like, that's where your value kind of goes away. I'm not worried that the Sox are going to stink. Like, he could put up like such ridiculous numbers that he garners some attention, and then maybe he's in a competitive situation with a playoff team, and he's noticed more on the national scene. 27-1, like, I see that next to his name, and I want to bet it. But the thing is, like, the possible trade, and is it going to be to the other league, could completely mess that up. Other names that pop, like McClanahan's always a guy, but it looks like he's going to miss half the season that you want to take a look at. Joe Ryan, 50-1 over in Minnesota. He's got that sort of potential. Okay, this guy was awful last year, but it's a monster number. And when he's right, he has this sort of a ceiling. Can Rodon bounce back? We've seen teams players go to New York, stink to start, all the pressure, it gets to them, and then maybe it takes them a year to settle in. Rodon is 100-1 at some spots. Numbers all over the place. There are some 50s out there as well. I know it's tough to beat out his teammate when his teammate's Garrett Cole, but I'm just saying that if he can, he's one of those guys that you talk about putting together a full season, if he ever can.
Right.
He has the ability to win the Cy Young.
Mike Rutherford of Card Chronicle and the Mike Rutherford Show every afternoon in Louisville with us here on BetQL Daily. The SEC, as we talk about conference to conference, the hierarchy of things here, Mike, the SEC is 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 removed from being like a 4-bid league, right? Like, and the SEC is one of the powerhouses this year. Looks like increasingly a 7-bid league, but every team has sort of the dents in the armor. And there's a couple interesting matchups tomorrow. Early, we've got Florida and South Carolina. a 7 seed and a 6 seed, according to bracketologies out there, all the way through to the primetime matchup between Tennessee and Alabama, which should be, in my opinion anyway, the best game of the day tomorrow night. How do you handicap the conference top to bottom, and what do you think of these two matchups in particular?
I think the SEC is great, and it pains me as a Louisville fan who's grown up spending my entire life saying, "Congrats, UK, you dominate the little boys league, the SEC. You're not playing real basketball." The SEC a few years ago, everyone knows that they're super cash rich. Like they are loaded with money. They can throw money at whatever they want. And they went ahead, and a lot of these programs out there that historically have not cared about college basketball that much invested heavily in college basketball. They went out, they landed top tier coaches, they upgraded facilities, and you're starting to see a lot of these programs reap the benefits. They've done better than any other conference in college basketball over the last 5 years, I would say, have done a remarkable job when it comes to hiring coaches. And the first matchup that you talk about is perfect evidence of that. Todd Golden, who I hate because he's younger than I am and looks like he's like 10 years younger than I am, which is, I'm not ready for that yet, but he's there. He looks like he's 28 years old, but he is a rising star in college basketball. He took San Francisco to new heights. He plays this nerd ball style that's heavy in analytics. I think there was some concern about how that would translate over to a program like Florida, and it's translating pretty well. They've been just about as good as anybody the last month in the season. And then Lamont Paris was a hire that a lot of people rolled their eyes at and said, yeah, couple nice years at Chattanooga. Does he really warrant a Power 5 job? And now South Carolina is doing all they can to scramble to keep him in the long term because he's been so good this year. I don't know. Like, I like Florida bigger picture in the NCAA tournament. South Carolina screams the classic overachiever that maybe gets a seed, in that 4, 5, 6 range where they get picked off in the first round and reality kind of comes back to bite them. I think Florida is more equipped to make a run in the NCAA tournament. But I like a lot of these SEC teams, like Tennessee. The one you talk about, all of these teams having potential fatal flaws. Tennessee's only real fatal flaw is their past flameouts in the NCAA tournament, which I think is kind of unfair to hold against them. I get that they're probably the best program that's never been to a Final Four. I get that Rick Barnes has struggled in the NCAA tournament. They check pretty much every other single box. They're the second best defensive team in all of college basketball. They address their offensive issues by going out there and getting, I think, the most impactful transfer in college basketball in Dalton Connect, who maybe is the best scorer in all of college basketball. You forget Zakai Ziegler, the starting point guard, tore his ACL on this exact day a year ago, and that was a big part of the reason why they didn't have any offense going into the NCAA tournament. He's healthy. He's playing as well as he ever has. Tennessee is very, very, very good, and they seem, again, if you take their history out of it and take Rick Barnes' history out of it, they seem like a top-tier Final Four contender to me. I like them more than any other team in the SEC, and I like a lot of teams in the SEC.